Welcome to today's deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you joining us for this one.
Yeah, we've got a lot to cover today.
We really do. And I want to start by asking you to picture a very specific scene. It's a stark visual contrast that's drawn directly from the local reporting in our stack of sources today.
It's a tough one to picture, but important.
Right. So imagine you are taking a walk on the sidewalks just outside of Baltimore City Hall. Right now on those streets, you're going to see tents.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see blankets, backpacks, and a very real, very harsh snapshot of city residents who are actively struggling with housing and daily hunger.
Right, just right outside the building.
Exactly. But if you look at what's been happening inside City Hall, specifically inside the mayor's office behind closed doors, you find a completely different reality.
A very different reality.
You find taxpayer-funded expense reports for $740 Maryland crab cakes.
Wow.
You find bottomless, freshly popped popcorn, daily fresh fruit trays, and massive tabs being run up in stadium skyboxes.
It is a profound and honestly jarring contrast. And that disconnect between the street level and the executive suites is at the very center of what we're unpacking today.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at a massive $11.5 million waste probe conducted by the Baltimore Inspector General.
The IG.
Right, the IG. This investigation uncovered nearly $1 million in lavish and, in many cases, highly questionable spending by Mayor Brandon Scott's administration.
$1 million is not a small number.
No, it's not. And maybe even more importantly, we're going to look at the explosive transparency lawsuit that this entire probe has triggered.
Yeah, the lawsuit is huge. But, before we dive in, we need to note that our stack of sources today includes politically charged commentary and reporting from various local and right-leaning outlets.
Good point.
We want to be crystal clear. We are absolutely not taking any sides or endorsing the viewpoints of these publications. Our only job today is to impartially report the factual claims and ideas contained in the original source material so you can understand exactly what's going on.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sheer volume of the spending detailed in this Inspector General's report is something we really need to break down to fully grasp.
We really do. Let's look at the numbers.
We are talking about a total of roughly $890,000 spent over approximately 3 years.
Right.
And to be clear, this isn't money going toward infrastructure repairs or filling potholes or funding emergency services.
No, definitely not.
The vast majority of this, over $800,000, was spent on food catering office parties and flowers.
The investigators really zeroed in on how this money was moving. They looked specifically at the use of city procurement cards.
The P cards.
Exactly, the P cards. Basically a corporate credit card for government employees. And they audited the city's financial system for the period between July 2022 and November 2025.
Okay, so a 3-year window.
Right. And one of the most eye-catching figures in the entire report revolves around the mayoral box suites at Baltimore Ravens and Baltimore Orioles games.
Football and baseball games.
Yep. The report details over $52,000 spent on food and beverages inside those stadium skyboxes.
I mean, I have to imagine stadium food isn't cheap, but $52,000 is a massive catering bill for football and baseball games.
It is, and here is a crucial detail from the sources that makes that number even more staggering. The city actually receives a massive 70% discount on purchases made at those stadiums.
Wait, a 70% discount?
Yes. So when the report says they spent $52,000 on the P cards, the actual street value of that food and drink, what it would cost a regular fan sitting in the stands, was roughly $150,000.
$150,000 in actual value. What on earth are they eating in these suites to run up a tab like that?
Well, the investigators pulled the receipts. We're talking about receipts that include $740 just for Maryland crab cakes.
Just for crab cakes.
Yep. The report also notes instances of prohibited alcohol purchases being mixed in with the food tabs.
That is just wild. $700 on crab cakes while people are literally sleeping in tents a few blocks from the office.
The optics are really tough.
And from what I understand, looking at the sources, this lavish spending wasn't just confined to the stadium suites, right? The internal office parties were also a major focus of the IG's investigation.
They were. There's one highly specific anecdote in the report about a farewell party that really highlights the culture of spending.
Oh, right, the chief of staff.
Yes. The mayor's office threw a bon voyage party for a high-ranking employee, specifically the chief of staff, Marvin James.
Okay.
The investigators went through the line items for this party, and the total cost to the taxpayers was $3,636.
3.5 grand for an office goodbye party.
Yep.
I need to know what a taxpayer-funded party of that size actually looks like, because that's huge.
The breakdown is fascinating. They spent $324 on a balloon arch,
A balloon arch.
$217 on a cake. They dropped $394 on 5 custom foam boards featuring the employee's face.
Custom phone boards.
5 of them.
5 custom foam boards of his own face paid for by the city.
And then the bulk of the cost was roughly $2,600 spent on a massive catered spread of crab balls, meatballs, and a grilled salmon platter.
I am just stuck on the logistics here. If I expense a $20 lunch at my job, my accounting department wants a receipt, a business justification, and a list of who was there.
Right, exactly.
How do you casually expense thousands of dollars for balloon arches and salmon platters? And where was this guy even going to warrant such a massive send-off?
Well, that is the ultimate punchline to this particular expenditure.
Oh, boy.
He didn't even leave City Hall.
You're joking.
Now, after the party, the employees simply transferred to a different advisory role within the administration, a position that pays over $190,000 a year.
You've got to be kidding. So the taxpayers funded a nearly $4,000 goodbye party for an executive who literally just moved his stuff to a different desk in the same building.
It really highlights the casual nature of how public funds were being utilized. And that casual approach extended to everyday routine purchases, too.
Like what?
The report details between $33,000 and $42,691 spent on floral arrangements.
Tens of thousands of dollars on flowers. What are they decorating?
Well, the receipts show these were bought for executive leadership staff, birthdays, bereavements, baby announcements, and even a mayoral baby shower.
A baby shower. I have to assume flowers aren't exactly standard issue on a government expense report. What do the city's actual rules say about this?
The procurement manual is completely unambiguous. In all of its versions past and present, the manual explicitly prohibits the purchase of flowers for any reason using a city P card.
Explicitly prohibits it.
It's a strict blanket ban, yet tens of thousands of dollars are spent on them anyway. And beyond the prohibited flowers and the parties, the report lists a steady stream of daily luxury perks.
Right. I saw this in the sources.
The office was expensing pizza, banana bread pudding, bottomless freshly popped popcorn, and investigators even found an email request asking for a, quote, fresh fruit tray available to everyone in the mayor's suite daily.
It sounds like they were running a boutique hotel out of the mayor's suite. Which brings up the most obvious question. How does this actually happen?
Right, how does the money get out the door?
Yeah, how do hundreds of thousands of dollars get spent on prohibited items, crab cakes and lavish catering, without anyone in the accounting department hitting the brakes?
What's fascinating here is that in many cases, nobody was hitting the brakes because the approval process was being completely bypassed.
Entirely.
The Inspector General found over 336 P-card transactions totaling more than $167,000 that completely lacked the mandatory approval waivers from the Bureau of Procurement.
So they were just swiping the cards and ignoring the required paperwork.
Pretty much. And it points to a severe structural bottleneck within the city's oversight system that allowed this to go unchecked.
What kind of bottleneck?
The investigators found that there is only one single program coordinator responsible for auditing more than 200 P-card holders citywide.
One person auditing 200 government credit cards.
Think about that workload. Since June 2022, the city has processed over $36 million in P-card transactions across all of its agencies.
That is absurd.
Because there is only one person checking this mountain of receipts, it can take 6 to 8 months for delayed reconciliations or improper purchases to even be detected.
That's a massive blind spot. It's essentially a system designed to fail if people decide to bend the rules.
Absolutely.
But the sources show that even when the Procurement Bureau did try to enforce the rules and do their job, the mayor's office just found a way around them.
The annual crab feast with the city council is a perfect example of this.
Yes. I was just thinking of that anecdote from the report. So the mayor's office submits a formal request to use the P card for this catered crab feast.
Right.
The Purchasing Bureau actually looks at it, and they deny the request. They explicitly tell the mayor's office in writing that this is a, quote, poor use of city funds.
They called it out.
Exactly. So they actually got caught and told no.
They got a no, but they certainly didn't accept it. They completely bypassed the purchasing department and took the request directly to the director of finance, who went ahead and approved it anyway.
Just went straight over their heads.
Yep. The investigators were even told that if the mayor's office ever gets pushback from purchasing their standard operating procedure, is just to talk it out with the finance director to get what they want.
It's incredible.
Mhm.
It shows that the issue isn't just a lack of oversight resources. It's an active circumvention of the existing controls.
Right, it's a culture issue.
Exactly. But we really need to look at how Mayor Brandon Scott and his administration are responding to all of this.
Yeah.
Because they aren't hiding from the spending.
Not at all. They are vigorously defending these purchases and have offered several very specific justifications for them.
Okay, let's hear them.
Let's start with the stadium suites. Mayor Scott argued that there is a long historical precedent for utilizing those skyboxes.
Right.
He told reporters that the city has been spending money on suites at Camden Yards and M&T Bank Stadium since he was a child. He also pointed out that the state of Maryland maintains its own skyboxes at those exact same stadiums.
So the argument is basically everyone else does it and we've always done it.
Furthermore, the administration framed the spending as a matter of logistical support and basic employee welfare.
Employee welfare. Okay.
The mayor's chief of staff, J.D. Merrill, defended the hundreds of thousands spent on food and catering by explaining that public servants often work long, inconvenient hours, particularly during emergencies.
Yeah.
He argued that these employees deserve, quote, basic dignity and necessary logistical support while serving the city.
I also noticed in the sources that the chief of staff really tried to downplay the financial impact of all this. He calculated that the unapproved P-card transactions only represent about 0.19% of the mayor's office budget over that specific time period.
They're essentially arguing that while the raw numbers sound high to an outsider in the context of a massive city budget, it's a microscopic fraction.
A rounding error, basically.
Right. And the mayor specifically claimed the stadium suites weren't just for executives. They were used to host young people who had never been to a game before, as well as teachers, first responders, and Department of Public Works employees.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The DPW workers.
Yes, because the Inspector General heard that exact defense, that the suites were being used to provide basic dignity and reward hardworking Department of Public Works or DPW employees. And the sources point out a glaring, almost painful contradiction regarding those specific workers.
The timing of the Inspector General's investigations makes this contrast impossible to ignore.
It really does. During the exact same 3-year time frame that the mayor's office was expensing crab cakes and bottomless popcorn in air-conditioned stadium suites, the Inspector General was conducting a completely separate investigation into the Department of Public Works.
Yeah.
And that investigation found that DPW's solid waste workers, the people out there doing the grueling physical work of collecting the city's trash, lacked access to basic water and Gatorade during the blistering summer months.
It is a devastating juxtaposition. On one hand, you have the administration arguing that they're providing, quote, basic dignity through high-end catering and stadium suites for their staff.
Right.
On the other hand, you have sanitation workers hanging off the back of garbage trucks in the Baltimore heat who aren't even being provided with basic hydration.
It really puts that 0.19% budget argument into perspective. When you are denying water to field workers expensing a $3,000 balloon arch in salmon platter, feels a lot less like a rounding error.
It definitely shifts the narrative.
So when reporters pressed Mayor Scott on the optics of all this, his defense ultimately came down to the strict letter of the law. He looked right at the cameras and said, quote, nothing illegal was done here.
And the follow-up to that statement is so telling.
Yeah. What did he say?
A reporter pushed back and asked, essentially, okay, even if it's not illegal, does that mean it's appropriate?
Right. The ethical question.
Exactly. And the mayor doubled down. He replied, not, if it's not illegal, then it's appropriate.
If it's not illegal, then it's appropriate. That is quite a standard to set for spending taxpayer money.
It shifts the entire conversation away from ethics or best practices or public optics and reduces it to a purely legal threshold.
And as we're about to see, that legal threshold is exactly where this entire situation escalates. This goes from being a story about crab cakes and farewell parties into a full-blown crisis over government transparency.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the spending report is really
Imagine
just
finding
the tip
out
of the
your
iceberg.
electric bill
The
is
underlying
secretly
tension
funding
between the
the
mayor's
government's massive
office and the
spending
inspector
addiction.
general has now erupted into a
realization when you
very
actually look
public,
at the
very
math.
high-stakes
Right.
lawsuit.
Well,
This is
imagine
wild
for a
to me.
second that you have
Inspector
a
General
savings account.
Isabel Mercedes Cummings is
And,
actively suing Mayor
you
Scott's
swore to your family,
administration.
hand over heart,
The city's own
that this
watchdog
money was
is
strictly
taking
for
the city
fixing
to
a
court.
leaking roof.
To understand how we
You
got
said,
to a lawsuit,
if we don't
we
fix
have
this
to look
roof,
at the core
the
conflict.
house is going to collapse.
Because the
It's an
friction
existential
actually
crisis for the
ignited
house.
during an
Exactly, it's the
investigation
Save the House
into a
Fund.
completely
But
different
then,
agency.
your car breaks down.
Yes, the
you spend
Mayor's
a little
Office
too
of
much on
Neighborhood
groceries,
Safety and
you've got
Engagement,
bills
also
piling up.
known as
So what do? You
MANAS.
raid the roof
Right.
fund. MANAS.
You take that
This
money,
is an
pay off
agency
your
the
credit
mayor
cards,
created
and
to
tell your
take a
family,
public
hey, don't
health
worry, we'll
approach
fix the roof
to
later.
reducing
Right.
gun violence. And in
The
this
Inspector
scenario,
General was
the
investigating
roof is
this
the
agency,
planet,
and as
or
part
at
of her
least
routine
Maryland's
work, she
climate
issued a
goals.
subpoena for
And the car is a
unredacted
massive
records.
self-inflicted
procedure for a watchdog.
$1.5
Since she
billion
took office in
state
2018,
budget
city
deficit.
agencies had
completely
always
avoidable
provided her
deficit,
with
I might add.
unredacted records.
Welcome
They
to the
need
deep
to see the
dive.
raw data, the
Today
names,
we're
and the
exploring a
numbers
classic
to follow
case
the money.
of fiscal sleight of
But this
hand
time the
coming
city
out of
refused
Annapolis.
to comply.
We are
They just
looking at
said
the
no to a
Strategic
subpoena.
Energy Investment
They did something
Fund,
much more
the
bureaucratic.
SAFE.
The city solicitor
huge
and the
pot of
mayor's
money
legal
meant
team
to save the
implemented a
environment,
brand
but it's
new
turning into a
policy.
hidden
new
tax
policy.
on
They
every
decided
single
to treat the
person
inspector
paying an
general's
electric
subpoena
bill in
as if
Maryland.
it were a standard
is. It's become the center of a
information
huge
request from
political
a
fight.
random citizen.
You've got
under
a
the
Democratic
Maryland Public
governor,
Information Act,
frustrated
or
environmentalists making
MPIA.
some very
wait,
awkward
let me make sure I
compromises,
understand this.
and
They
conservative
are
critics
using
who are
public
rightly calling this
transparency
whole
laws
thing a shell
to
game.
actually block
the watchdog.
And when you
from
look
seeing
at the documents we have
It's
today,
incredibly
reports,
clever in a legal
budget
sense.
proposals,
Let me give you an
critiques from
analogy
Senate
to explain
Republicans,
how bizarre
it
this
is
is.
really hard to unsee it.
Imagine
mission
a
for this
police
deep dive is
detective
simple.
showing up
Follow
to
the
a
money.
store with a
Always
warrant
follow
for
the money.
security
We
footage
are going
to
to
solve
see
a crime.
how a
Right.
fund
And the store
designed
owner
to fight
says,
climate change
sure, you can have the
is
tape,
being
but I'm
used to
going to
plug
treat you
holes
like
in
a
the state
random
budget.
customer asking for
And
it.
we'll
so
dig
I'm
into the
blurring out
argument that
everyone's
this isn't
faces
found money
and
at
cutting out
all.
half
This
the
is
video.
essentially
That's
a backdoor
crazy.
tax on
That
families.
is essentially what
Let's
the
get
city
right
is
into
doing
it.
to its
The
own
Strategic
watchdog.
Energy
By
Investment
treating the
Fund. It
subpoena
sounds
under
very
the
official,
MPIA,
very
the city
important.
claims they are
What does
allowed
it
to
actually do?
heavily redact
Well,
the documents.
on paper.
They blacked
It is
out
the
financial
state's
details
green
and personal
piggy bank.
records, citing
The
attorney-client
SIF is managed
privilege.
by the
So they
Maryland
handed
Energy
over documents
Administration. Its
where
whole
almost
stated
everything was
purpose
blacked
is to
out,
reduce
making
energy
it
bills,
completely
cut
impossible
waste,
for her
and
team
fund
to actually do their
renewable
jobs.
energy.
like solar panels
What
and
is the
efficiency
mayor's
upgrades.
defense
Exactly.
for this
But here is
sudden
the
change
real
in
aha
policy?
moment of the story.
Mayor Scott claimed that an account linked
Where
to the
does the
inspector
money
general had
actually
gained,
come
quote,
from?
unapproved
Because
and
they aren't just
unfettered
taxing you
access
directly
to the
for it.
confidential work of
No,
city
and that's why
attorneys.
politicians
Unapproved
absolutely love it.
access.
It feels
So the
free.
administration
So about
argues they are
40%
just
comes from regional
enforcing
carbon
standard
auctions.
rules to protect
But the big
privileged
chunk,
legal
the one
information.
growing like crazy,
But the inspector
comes with something
general is
called
warning that this
alternative
goes
compliance
way
payments,
beyond just
or ACPs,
redacting a few
Which is just a
documents.
fancy government
In
term
her
for a fine.
lawsuit, she
Right.
points out
It's a
a fine
stark
for failure.
reality
Let me break
about
it
the
down.
systems her
Maryland
team
law
uses to
forces
uncover
utility
waste.
companies
All
to
right,
buy
the
a certain
tracking
amount of
systems?
green
The
energy.
city has
They have
actually
proved they're
blocked
using
her
renewables.
office's
But if they
access
can't
to their
find that
internal
green energy,
tracking
or if it's
systems.
just way too
These
expensive
are the
on the market,
databases they
Which it
rely on
usually
to
is.
monitor
Yeah, the
sensitive
state gives them an
whistleblower
escape
complaints
hatch.
and internal
The
files.
utility
Without
can just
access
pay
to
a
those
fee
systems,
directly
the
to
watchdog
state
is
instead.
effectively
That
flying
fee is the
blind.
ACP.
They can't see
And here's
who's
the
viewing
kicker.
confidential complaints, and they
Utilities aren't
can't trace the
increasingly
internal
just
flow of
paying the
information
fine
to
because
protect
it's cheaper
the
than
people
actually
reporting
buying the green
corruption.
energy.
And here is
Wait,
the kicker
so
that brings
the
this
climate
whole
fund
deep
is
dive
getting
full circle.
incredibly rich.
Yeah, this is the big one.
The Inspector General made a point to
the
state
green energy
publicly
mandates are
that if the
failing.
mayor's
Precisely.
new
It is
restrictions
a
on record
completely
access had
perverse
been in place a
incentive.
few years
The
ago,
government
it
made
would
the
have
mandates
actively
so
limited
aggressive
her
and the market
ability
is so
to
distorted
uncover
that
the
power
very
companies are
spending
just
probe
writing
we
checks
just
to the
spent the
state
last
instead
20
of going
minutes
green.
talking about.
And the stats on this
She
are
is
just
arguing that
staggering.
this new
They
legal
are.
stance by
In
the city is a
2022,
direct
this revenue was
existential threat
$77
to
million.
her office's
By
independence.
2025,
Because if
it
she
jumped
can't
to
get the records,
$365
she can't
million.
find the waste.
Wow.
Exactly.
From
Her
77
lawsuit is
million to
asking the judge for a
365
court
million in
order
3
to
years.
affirm
Right, so now the
her
state has
subpoena
this
power and mandate
massive
direct direct access to unredacted city records
supposedly for green
under the
projects.
Baltimore City Charter.
But remember, that money
She
didn't
needs
just
the
fall
court
out of
to
the
block
sky.
any further
Utility companies
interference from the
paid those
administration.
fines.
Because
Do you
if
think
the
those
watchdog
massive
can't see the
corporations just
receipts,
eat that cost
we
out of the
never
goodness of
find
their
out about
hearts?
the
Oh, absolutely not.
$52,000
They
in the
pass
skyboxes,
every single penny
or
of
the
that on to the
prohibited
customer.
flower
Exactly.
budgets, or
It
the
shows
custom
up
phone
right on
boards
your
at the
electric
farewell
bill. So
party.
you,
None of it comes
the
to
everyday
light.
ratepayer,
So what does this all mean
are
for you
paying
listening
for
to
the
this right now?
utilities' failure
Think about
to
your
meet a
own
government
workplace
mandate.
or your own
The
household
state
budget.
collects your
Yeah,
money,
put yourself in
drops
their
it in the
shoes.
safe,
If
and
you
says,
submitted
look
an
at all this
expense
cash we
report
have for
for
the
a
climate.
$3,000
Which brings us to the
farewell
rate.
party for a colleague
Because that
who
money
didn't
is
even
definitely
leave,
not staying in the
or
climate fund.
expensed a
Not
$700
anymore. Enter
crab
Governor
cake
Wes
lunch
Moore.
without getting
His
the required
administration
approval
is
for
staring
what
down a
happened to you.
projected
You'd probably be fired.
$1.5
Exactly.
billion budget
Most of us operate in a
deficit.
reality where every
$1.5
dollar
billion.
is tracked and
You can't
must
just
be
ignore
justified.
a hole that deep.
You
And
can't.
that is why the administration's
And when government
defense
overspends
that this
to that
lavish
degree,
spending
they
is
start
just
checking under the couch cushions for loose change.
0.9% of their budget
Except here, the
often
couch
rings
cushion
hollow.
is the green
It's the
energy
principle of
fund,
the thing.
and the
Right.
loose change
To
is
an administrator
hundreds of
managing millions,
millions,
So what's the actual
$800,000 might look
proposal?
like
How
a
much are they
rounding
taking?
error.
The governor's
But the
plan
taxpayers funding
diverts
it, especially in a city
$292
with
million
profound
directly
economic
from
and
the
housing
SAFE into
challenges.
the state's general fund.
That
Just
number
to
is a
balance the
massive
books.
reality
Just to
check.
cover
I
their
want to leave you with a
overspending,
final lingering
they
question to mull
are
over
using
as we wrap
energy
up.
fines to pay
We heard
for
the mayor
general
argue that
government
because the
operations.
spending wasn't technically
Bureaucracy,
illegal,
salaries,
it was
their office
therefore
supplies, you
appropriate.
name it. If the
But
ultimate
that's not even
standard
all
for
of it.
government spending
I read
is
in the
simply,
sources
quote,
there's
it's
also
not
a
illegal,
rebate scheme.
rather than
Yes,
asking if it's the
this
most
is the part
ethical,
critics are calling
transparent,
a
or
political
effective use of
sweetener.
public
They're
funds.
grabbing another
What does that mean for the
$100
future of
million
public trust?
out of the
That's a
fund to
huge
give
question.
a one-time
When Watchdog has to
$40
sue the
rebate
very
to
government
eligible
it watches
$40.
just to read the
Earbucks.
receipts,
So let me get
who
this
is
straight.
ultimately
The
keeping
state
score?
mandates
That is a
drive up
powerful
energy
question,
costs.
and exactly
The
why
utility
we do
companies
these deep
pass
dives
those
into the
massive
source
costs
material.
to you and
We
me.
want to thank you so much
Our
for joining
bills
us
go
today
up
as
by
we unpack
hundreds of
all
dollars a
this.
year.
Thanks for listening.
And then the governor
Keep
takes a
paying
chunk of our own
attention,
money,
keep reading
hands us
past
back
the
a
headlines,
crisp
and most
$40 bill,
importantly, keep
and
asking the
basically
tough
says,
questions of
"You're
your own
welcome."
That is
institutions.
the exact
We will
math.
catch you
It's
on the
wild.
next
And if you look at the
deep
recent
dive.
supplemental